Okay, so what I do not want to do right now is sound like every other football pundit and say that football games are not won on paper, even though I know that that's true, because this is as academic as they should get. This is as academic as they do get. It is Talking Buccaneers with me, Fumane. Before Orlando Pirates takes on Djabal in the first preliminary round of the CAF Champions League, second leg. We won the first one, won 1-0 at Comoros over there. And I think the reason why we don't win that one, well, it's a combination of a few things. The first of which is that Djabal just know how to make a chaos of a football match. Second is obviously the conditions over there weren't that great. The pitch conditions weren't that great. Thirdly is we obviously had a mix of our fringe players and our regular starters, and I'll get into why that affected us. But yeah, the chunk that I could catch, Djabal was just terrible and turning the match into a terrible kind of contest. And yeah, obviously I didn't catch all of the match. And if anyone at Orlando Pirates is watching, by the way, please could you fly me out every time that we go to Africa, and you know that these games are not going to be televised, because I need to sit here and do a review and a preview. So yeah, so if anyone is watching Orlando Pirates, please, for Talking Buccaneers viewers, I need to give them quality reviews and previews. So please fly me out next time. Anyway, the chunks that I caught, Djabal weren't that great, and they just wanted to make it a dogfight for us, and it was, and they succeeded in that. But obviously, we prevail at the end, scoring late, getting that late goal through Lepasa, and coming back home with a 1-0 lead. I mean, where do I start? So obviously, like I said, this is as academic as they should get. It should be academic for a team that qualifies for the CAF Champions League via second spot in the DStv Premiership when that team comes against a team from Comoros. A few things. It's because, their league is just not that great. I was looking at the CAF rankings, and the South African league is ranked around 7th, where their league I think is ranked like around the 50th mark, I think 54th or even 50th or something like that. And I just think that and interestingly enough, even the second division in South Africa, the ABC Motsepe League, is ranked higher than their league, according to one website. I think it's a reputable website. I just can't remember what it was. But if you just go into Google and type in, CAF rankings, leagues, and things like that, you will see that they're really not anywhere near, where we should be thinking about our games are not won on paper. If it hurts that I sit here and say that, I'm sorry, but that's just facts. I think, especially coming back home, playing here at Orlando Stadium, it should be fairly academic. So the other point that I wanted to get to, besides the fact that the pitch conditions weren't that great in Comoros, obviously the head coach mixed the starting 11, and it was a starting 11 of our regular starters and some of our fringe players. And I thought, two things happening there. I think the fringe players sometimes aren't that great. For example, I mean, not here to bash anyone particularly, but I think Evanga, you see the drop-off in quality when you play people like Evanga up front. He's just not Lepasa nor Erasmus. And so there's that going. But there's also the fact that someone might argue, and I'm here to argue that argument by someone, that they would make that, these regular starters, especially for these games, I mean, these people are human beings, and psychologists will probably agree with me, if any of them are watching, that the motivation for Saleng going to Comoros to play a first preliminary round in Africa is not that high. His motivation just isn't that high. It's not the same as when he's playing back home in the DStv Premiership, fighting for Sundowns. I think he obviously knows somewhere in his mind that this should be a must-win for us. So maybe the motivation isn't all that much for these players to perform at that level. I mean, I know it's in Africa, but the quality of opposition just isn't that great. And I think that's just something that happens in the minds of these players that know that they're regular starters. And I know the coach would probably be here and argue that no one has a given place in the lineup. Everyone starts from the same point, and it's battling it out for your place at training. And I'm sure, he'd love to say that, but the reality is we know that some players are regular and some are just fringe players. And the truth is, they know too. These players know too. I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't fight for their place. I know they give their all when they play, these players. But there is just such a thing as, these regular starters, when they go and play these relatively easy games, the motivation is not the same. So I think there was a bit of that also happening. Also added that, for example, someone like Saleng, again, to use him again as reference, is he's just played a ridiculous amount of minutes. And obviously players have varying fitness capacities. The medical department at Pirates could pull up some test and say to me and prove to me how Saleng is just a fit freak who can play, 90 times 30 minutes per season. However, I just do think that he's a human being, and also just looking at the standard of sports science in South Africa, I don't think that it's world class. I think it's great. Obviously, we're very professional. Our league is very professional. But I do think that we are not at the level where these players can be made available to play these intense games so many times in a short period of time. And I think maybe that's just something that plays into it with people like Saleng and other players. Having played so many minutes so far, 5 games already, I think he's only missed something like 3 minutes, or maybe something like 10 minutes of all those 6 games in this short amount of time. Just this August, he has played so many games, Monapule Saleng, and he had to play again in Africa. And I think the plan would have been, I think the coach would have planned that, going to Djabal, playing against Djabal, let's get an early lead, maybe if we can get it to 2-0, 3-0, first half or second half, whatever, and then pull Saleng in the 60th minute mark, give him that 40-minute rest, and things like that. But obviously the plan had to go out the window, because as the match goes on and on and on, and you're not scoring, and then you end up keeping them on because you're hoping to get that victory, to get that result. Because a disaster of a situation would be that you go to Comoros, you don't get that away goal, and then you come back home and Comoros just sits back and they try and get it to penalties, and then you get knocked out like that. I think the plan would have been that an away goal is a must for the bigger team. We need to definitely get that away goal, and then whatever the scoreline is, then we can bring it back home and manage things from there. And obviously we get there and we don't get that away goal. I beg your pardon. We don't get that away goal, and so it's somewhat of a change of plans. We've got to adjust to what's kind of happening. Players get more minutes than the coach would have wanted them to. And I mean, it could be that the coach knew that there's 7 days of rest after that game, so he then risks to play these players that you'd hope that he'd rest for that game and make sure that they get the result. And he introduces people like Lepasa for that game. Let's get the result and it's great that we got the result. So coming back home, again, I mean, I'm here talking about it because obviously I love to talk about the mighty Buccaneers. But it's also because I have to talk about them, because this is as academic, I think, as it gets. I think ideal scenario, the coach would like to have wrapped it and, have this game as one of those free runs and get other players involved into it and things like that. But because we obviously failed to win it so with a clear margin, the plan will have to change a little bit. And also our coach is a bit of a pragmatic. I definitely think even with our fringe players, we can win this one, especially back home, especially with the lead. If obviously we are responsible and don't concede and make sure we don't concede in the last 10 as well or last 15 minutes, I think we could get away with playing some fringe players and getting other people that haven't been a part of it, like Kimvidi, whom I hear has already gotten his work permit and is eligible to play games for us now. I think perfect scenario to be getting those players into it and things like that. I think even with a fairly new lineup, you can win this. I think it's that academic for us. However, our coach is obviously a pragmatic, and he'd probably say that he's got to respect the opposition and he's going to go with a strong lineup, which I think he will do. I think he'll mix a little bit, but it definitely will be a lineup that is strong, especially after 7 days of rest. He'll be looking to make sure these players don't get too rusty, especially because some of them didn't play in that first game. Some were already rested in that game, so it becomes too long if he then rests them again in this game. So he'll obviously start with I think we'll definitely see our regular starters be a part of it. Maybe they'll get pulled thinking about the game midweek. I can't remember what we're playing again now. Midweek, in 3 days' time on Tuesday, I think we've got a game. So he'll obviously be thinking about that. So ideal scenario obviously is let's get 2 goals, first half, be ahead, 3-0 on aggregate, and then we can pull some players and then hopefully throw others into it, keep them a part of it, which is so important because you want to give these players rest. You want to give people like Saleng rest, not for rest's sake, but because, it's a long season and these minutes will catch up with them. The intensity of these games, they'll start to feel them when we need them most. There's big games coming up in the future that I don't know of. It could be just the game against Cape Town City, but because the league is so tight and things like that, and there's just a very intense schedule with games in Africa, games over here, cup games and stuff like that, maybe a few players injured, then you need Saleng to play those 3 games in a row. But because he's done it so much early on in the season, then he starts to feel those minutes. Maybe then he gets away with a niggle and injuries and things like that. So if you can spare him now, this is the time. And so it's going to be so important to get these other players into it. People like Kapinga, whom I don't know why he's not playing yet. It could be that, they're getting him up to speed. I know he hasn't played a lot of competitive football in a long time. He's just been sitting on that Sundowns bench for a long time. So maybe they're just getting him up to speed. Kimvidi, important, I think, get him into it. Quality player, let's start to get them into it, get them be a part of it, and let them also start contributing in these other games, and I say other games in that, the relatively easier games. Let's get the other players winning those ones, and then we can rest people and be able to shuffle it about and things like that. And so, again, I said there's not a lot for me to say about this because this is not an opposition that I know about very much. Obviously, I don't watch a lot of African football, especially, specific leagues. Also because, there's a bit of a broadcasting thing going on where we don't get to see these African games and stuff like that. Maybe you guys know what's going on there and can shed some light in the comment section, which I appreciate. It's a community. Let's all be a part of it, learn together, grow together. What I do want to say is that of the little that I caught and just the much that I know of our team, it should be academic, very academic. I think we can even get players. This is the important thing for me. I think this is, if you heard nothing these last, I don't know how many minutes I've spoken now. If you've heard nothing, what I think is going to be important for me is, are we going to get other players involved in it? How do we wrap this fixture and win it while also getting other positive things that we want to see going forward, which is getting other players into it, involving the other fringe players, or maybe not so much fringe players, but the players that we know are going to be so important for us. Start giving them those minutes, because it obviously is hard for us to integrate them in the league games. So these are the games where I think you want to throw them in. The cup games are also going to be hard because it's wafa and no pun intended with the MTN8, it's like you can't lose, you've got to win. I beg your pardon. So these are the games I think in Africa, although the stakes are very high, obviously, it would be a disaster to crash out of Africa, especially at this point. But just the quality of a position allows you to get other players into it. And that's what I'll be looking forward to. I'll be looking forward to sitting here again after the game and reviewing it. Until then, up the mighty Bucks. Cheers. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video from Talking Buccaneers. If you did, please hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all our future content.